this week's edition of Overdrive. I'm Sohini Datna. It's been a decade since Tata Motors has taken over the Jaguar Land Rover marquee, and the new fruit from this particular takeover is the new Tata Harrier. We've seen teasers of this SUV for a while now, and we've finally driven it. Take a look.
Don't be startled. This layout seems to be the in thing these days with car makers, especially if you equate the face of a car with the face of a human being, where the grille is the nose, the air dams are the mouth, and the headlamps are the eyes. Citroën being Citroën started this quirky trend of placing the eyes below the level of the nose a few years back, and then Hyundai picked up on that trend with the Kona and the Santa Fe. And their siblings at Kia are going to try something similar with the SP concept that was shown at the Auto Expo. And speaking of the Indian scheme of things, even Mahindra gave it a try with the Nuvo Sport. But I believe that the most handsome attempt from an Indian car maker at this layout is this, the Tata Harrier. The Tata Harrier began life as the H5X concept that was shown at the 2018 Auto Expo, and it carries forward all those bold lines and that muscular stance. The squared wheel arches have been rounded off though, and the sharp lighting elements of the concept make way for relatively more conventional units. The range-topping trims come with projector beam lamps, and you also have a fog lamp placed right underneath. The overall housing is quite large compared to what the concept showcased, and the treatment is a bit polarizing. But what certainly looks good though are the LED daytime running lights. They feel like they've come straight out of a sci-fi movie. They also integrate the turn blinkers, and they are a standard fit across the range. The tail lights look sophisticated with a three-dimensional design, and the tailgate isn't peppered with too many badges, which is a good thing. The Harrier also has small overhangs, and the rear sweeps up like a new-age Land Rover. You will frequently hear me using the words Land Rover when I'm talking about the Harrier, and that is because this car debuts the new Omega architecture for Tata, which essentially is a modified version of Land Rover's D8 architecture that also underpins the Discovery Sport. But you see, it's not only about borrowing the underpinnings. Borrowing the Land Rover architecture also means it defines the position of the A-pillar, the size of the cabin, the wheelbase choices. So merging those typical Land Rover proportions with the unique design theme that Tata has to offer is not an easy job. But you look at this car closely and you realize it's all turned out astonishingly well. Speaking of the wheelbase, it is exactly as much as the Discovery Sport, which also allows for a body that's larger than the XUV Fighter below and the Compass. In fact, the Harrier is the largest car in its class, and that has an immediate advantage inside the cabin, making it quite a spacious place to be in. Even with the driver's seat completely retracted, just look at the amount of knee room and leg space that I have. I could literally sit here with my legs crossed if I want to. Even the headroom is very generous. The visibility outside of the window is quite good too. The space here is really nice. It has a spacious feel to it despite the use of darker colors. I also like the angle of the backrest on the rear seat. I think it's going to be quite comfortable on long distance journeys. The under thigh support is good. The contouring of the seats is quite nice. You have a big flat section here, so placing three adults here is not going to be a problem at all. You also get B-pillar mounted AC vents. The AC in itself is quite powerful. You also have these cup holders here. You have this really nice double-decker panel here for your storage. So the overall space here at the back is quite nice. In fact, unlike the Hexa, storage spaces aren't a concern in the Harrier. There are plenty of spaces for knickknacks and 1-litre bottles, and there's a generously roomy 425-litre boot that can help fuel your road trip dreams. I quite like the treatment of the cabin. Everything is so nicely put together. You finally have soft touch materials on a Tata, and I think that's a big move. The fit and finish is really nice. The design looks clutter-free. This is certainly the best that we've seen from Tata so far. I also like the instrumentation. It's got an analog speedometer with a big digital display on the side for the tachometer and the other relevant data. I wish to have slightly larger telltale lights that were easy to read than these tiny ones that are very easy to miss. But otherwise, I like the treatment. I like how crisp that screen is. I like how the menus are done. Everything looks really nice. The only change I would have liked is probably a more premium looking steering wheel compared to what we've seen in the other Tata cars. This is very similar to that. But otherwise, no complaints. I like the overall vibe of this cabin. The stick-out display is a massive 8.8-inch high-resolution touchscreen that is split into 3 zones, a central display area for the infotainment data, flanked by the infotainment control panels on either side. The display is crisp and the interface is intuitive and in line with the instrumentation, making it safer to read when driving. What also makes this a little more safer is the fact that this infotainment can cast certain data like navigation or telephony or audio info to the top section of the instrumentation. It's a cheap yet effective alternative to a head-up display. In fact, some cost-cutting measures are evident when you look at the car or the brochure closely. The premium feel of the car leaves you wanting for things like maybe a sunroof and wireless charging. The handbrake looks fancy but isn't the electronic type. The steering system too isn't electronic and is the old-school hydraulic type. The alloys aren't machine finished and the suspension is a twist blade type instead of the multi-link setup that the Discovery Sport employs. All this helps keep the costs low, which is fine by me as long as it achieves the desired level of reliability and functionality without compromising on the ownership experience. The suspension certainly does that. It has a supple ride whether you're driving alone or driving with a full house, and I did subject it to some really sharp bumps and it remained quite impressive. Complementing that are the tires, and the 235 section size is standard across the range. The steering is quite well tuned too. It does have that dead at center feel, but beyond that there's good feedback. It also weighs up well at highway speeds. Lane changes at highway speeds aren't unnerving either. And when you're driving in the city, it's conveniently light. It is complemented by an equally light clutch, which is a big deal, especially if you compare it to the painfully heavy clutch pedal operation in the Jeep Compass. The Compass reference comes from the fact that the Cryotech engine that powers the Harrier is the same Fiat Source 2-litre multi-jet turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel engine that also powers the Compass. Tata, however, has their own clutch actuator on the gearbox, and that is the reason why the clutch action is much lighter. The pedal travel is still as long as it is in the Compass. It's a typical Fiat thing, but the clutch action, the pedal of the clutch action is much lighter. It also gives it the self-adjusting feature that Tata keeps touting about on their brochures. The Cryotech engine puts out about 140 PS of power, which is a 35 PS deficit over the Compass. It has an identical 350 Nm of torque though. Even the curb weight is in the same pin code as the Compass. The power delivery is quite linear, and for now you will only get this car with a 6-speed manual gearbox, just the way the Compass does. But Tata also says that an automatic is being considered, and unlike the Compass, they aren't really limited by the option of only having a dual clutch transmission, which will turn out to be quite expensive. Apart from their own tuning, Tata has also added more of their own flavor to this drivetrain by way of a Hexa-like terrain response system and multiple driving modes. There are 3 engine maps to choose from. There is City, which you will do most of your driving in. There is the Eco mode, which dulls down the throttle response significantly. In fact, the engine starts feeling a little strained with the Eco mode. So if you're out on the highway, that's a mode that I wouldn't really recommend. And then you have the Sport mode, which makes a noticeable change to the performance and the character of the engine. It becomes a lot more free revving, and that's the one that you would want to choose if you're out on the highway or in the twisties. You also have the terrain response system, which essentially uses functions of the traction control and the ABS to fine-tune the performance of the grip, whether you're driving on the wet surface or rough road or even dry surface for that matter. So depending on the preset that you've chosen, it will fine-tune all these things to give you maximum amount of grip. We tried the rough road mode and the braking response was surprisingly good on travel for these road tires when compared to the city mode. The brakes themselves are a bit spongy and need getting used to, but do their job as intended despite having drum brakes on the rear wheels. The Harrier also has a hill descent control should you need it. It's natural for anyone to expect the Harrier to have much better off-roading capabilities right out of the box, considering the fact that it is based on Land Rover underpinnings. Unfortunately, however, all that you get right now is a front-wheel drive configuration. Should the need arise, should they see enough demand for an AWD variant, they will always be able to bring out a Harrier AWD. In fact, these are very small niggles that in the larger scheme of things don't really dampen the experience that the Harrier has to offer. The Harrier might not have the canvas to stir up a cult following like the Safari did, but it's certainly just as important a step as the Safari in Tata's passenger car history. To that effect, the Harrier might also see more drivetrain options in the years to come, including electrified variants, which would be a big step forward. While cars like the Tiago showcase the direction that Tata was headed in, the Harrier cements the fact that Tata has become a force to reckon with.
Well, the countdown has already begun to 2019, and January is the month when Tata will launch the Harrier, and we do expect it to be a stunner because it will be launching this Jeep Compass competitor in the price range of a Hyundai Creta. Now, we'll just a segment here on the show after a very long time to answer all of your queries. We have with us our editor Shumi to answer all of your queries. Hi Shumi, our first question this week comes in from Prakash Kamalia. He writes in saying that he wants to buy an AMT hatchback. He will be using the car within the city. He says his monthly commute is 300 to 400 kilometers. He's shortlisted the Hyundai Santro. He says he likes the looks of it, but he's also considering the Maruti Ignis or the Tata Tiago. What would you suggest, Shumi?
Prakash, I think the choice really is between the Santro AMT and the Ignis AMT. The Ignis is a more expensive car, but it is also a larger car and you might be happier with it. But basically what you're trying to decide between the two cars is what kind of space do you need in the car, and if you do buy the Ignis, you also get more airbags and all of those features. So I would recommend that. I think the Ignis is the better car for you, but it's basically between the Santro and the Ignis. If the Ignis is too far beyond your budget, just pick up a Santro. Otherwise, it's the Ignis AMT for you.
Our next question this week comes in from Mohit Khanna. He writes in saying that he is very interested in buying the Java 42, or would you suggest that the Royal Enfield Bullet 500 is a better option?
We're getting lots of questions about whether to buy the Java, whether to book the Javas or not, but honestly I can't answer the question because as I stand here and talk to you today, we haven't actually ridden the motorcycles. So they look good, the promise is nice, the prices seem okay, but until we ride them, it's very hard to comment on what is good and what is bad about these motorcycles. So you'll just have to wait a little bit longer. So Java 42 or Bullet 500, wait for the Parak. I really don't have an answer yet. Let's ride the bikes and I'll come back to you.
Up next, Rajesh Srivastava writes in saying that he wants to buy a very capable 4x4 SUV. He has shortlisted the newly launched Mahindra Alturas or the Toyota Fortuner or the Ford Endeavour. Now we do have a comparo coming up shortly on this one as well, but what would you suggest, Shumi?
I think it's a little bit too early to be thinking about the reliability aspect of the Alturas. This is true for all new cars. It does take a little bit of time to establish how reliable they're going to prove to be or not. But in the market today, I believe the car that dominates that segment by a long margin is the Endeavour. Between the way it is designed, the space inside the car, the way the engines feel, and how cheap it is now to keep Fords because of their aggressive push to ensure that the cost of living comes down, it's really a challenging proposition to beat. So if these are the question set that you're asking me, I think the Fortuner is the safe bet for you to go to. If you want to take the Alturas on and you're not sure about reliability and the long-term prospect, just hold your horses. Wait 3, 4, 5 months time, let a few Alturases come out onto the street, let people drive them and we'll get feedback, and then you'll know whether it's a car that should be purchased or not. But if you're in a rush right now, the Fortuner is eyes closed the SUV to buy from that class.
Well, our final question this week comes in from Johan Irani. He wants to know whether Hyundai is considering to add an automatic variant in its top-end model anytime soon.
Unfortunately, I don't think so. I think as the pricing structure works, the more expensive the car becomes, the harder and harder it becomes for an automatic option to arrive, because it just prices itself out of the market, as it were, and people like you who are looking for all the features with an automatic are just very few. So chances are, I don't think that the automatic SXO is coming anytime soon.
Well, if you have any more queries, don't hesitate to send them to us at helpdesk@overdrive.co.in. That is our email address. You can also send them to us via Facebook or Twitter, and we will get Shumi to answer them for you. Drive. Now, the Hyundai Santro is all set to take a big pie out of the super mini segment. Now, are the Tata Tiago and the Celerio ready to fend off that competition? Let's take a look.
Our market is maturing. Credit is easier to get, spending capacity is better than ever, which means your first car doesn't need to be entry spec. You can aspire for something bigger, something more feature-rich. The king of hatchbacks, Maruti Suzuki, identified this as an opportunity, and then they created a premium alternative to the Wagon-R. It was this, the Celerio. Its claim to fame was the automated manual transmission, which not only made the convenience of an automatic much cheaper to own and easier to access, but it also opened the gates for other premium entry-level cars to follow. The first of which was this, the Tata Tiago, and the latest is this, the all-new Hyundai Santro. This car not only brings back a very significant model name, but also happens to be a tall boy. That body style usually promises a roomier cabin, but their designs are often quite boxy, as seen on the Wagon-R or the Stingray. The Santro, on the other hand, has a more contemporary design made up of flowing creases and a layered form, and not boring slabs put together. That said, their radical front end and a relatively more sober rear end isn't to everyone's taste. I quite like it, but only in its sober colors. The Tiago was Tata's first all-new car in the longest time, and when it came out in 2016, the design direction that it established has been liked by many ever since. The fine detailing of various elements like the grille, the lights and even the wheel arches gives it a modern and upmarket stance without looking overdone in any sense. The Celerio has a slightly more understated design to it. It looks like a humble evolution of the Alto, which it is. But it is now begging for a significant facelift in the light of its new age competition. Both the Celerio and the Tiago also offer slightly beefed up looking variants in the Celerio X and the Tiago Energy, and I won't be surprised if the Santro follows suit with an active variant too. But I like these hatchbacks in their birthday suits, so let's get down to evaluating them. So which one of these three looks better? Well, we've always said design is a personal preference. For me, it's the Tiago. You see, the Celerio takes the path of least resistance, the easy way out. It uses the tried and tested shape of the Alto and scales it up a bit more. And I'm sure there are many out there who appreciate that. You move on to the Santro, well, let's just say the design is polarizing. The Tiago in comparison looks more handsome, the dimensions are more proportionate, and I think the flashier colors look better on the Tiago as compared to the Santro. They don't look like an afterthought. Moving to the cabins, let's begin with the Celerio. With only the WagonR to beat back then, the Celerio didn't have to one-up the tall boy by leaps and bounds. Thanks to its handsome exterior and the automated manual transmission, all it needed in the cabin was a more flowing design for the dashboard, a bit of oomph in the upholstery choices, and better contouring of the seats, and that did the trick. First mover isn't always at an advantage. The Tiago came in with better materials, sporty body-colored inlays, a roomier cabin, an excellent audio unit, and a turn-based navigation system. Despite the oddly tall front seats and a tiny infotainment screen, the Tiago's cabin has a pleasing vibe to it that not only is more appealing than the Celerio, but also makes the little Suzuki feel dated than what it is. With these cars and a few others serving as a yardstick, the Santro has been able to mix the best of all. The tallboy design ensures a spacious cabin, the seats have better contouring, the fit and finish is excellent. It has some best-in-class features like rear AC vents, and the connectivity options of the touchscreen infotainment makes this car feel like it's from a segment higher. It also has more storage pockets and a generous boot. So which is the better cabin of the three? Well, if you haven't noticed already, it is the Santro. It's got more storage spaces, it's got better space at the back, at the front, it's got better contouring overall, it's a more comfortable place to be in. It's also got a more feature-rich infotainment. Now, of course, this doesn't get satellite navigation, but if you are choosing this variant and you do get this touchscreen infotainment system, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, both of which now support Google Maps. And that is by far the most used satellite navigation application all across the globe. So if you have one of these, you have satellite navigation by way of your smartphone. Overall, the answer is yes, it is the Santro that has the best cabin of the three. Let us quickly take a look at how these three cars compare on the features and the creature comforts that they offer. The cars that we have for this comparison are the petrol variants mated to the automated manual transmissions. While the Santro and the Celerio bear identical outputs, the Hyundai runs a 1.1-litre 4-cylinder engine in comparison to the thrumming 1-litre 3-cylinder from Suzuki. The Tiago, on the other hand, goes with a more premium 1.2-litre engine. Of the three cars, the Santro has the most refined engine, and at idling, it is the most silent too. The Tiago's engine judders under hard acceleration, while the Celerio's engine, well, it's just too noisy. So which is the better drivetrain of these three, and how much should it matter to you in your daily life? Well, at least on paper, at least on the brochure, at least in terms of specs, it is the Tiago's motor that has a big advantage. It's got more power, more torque than the Santro and the Celerio, and the Revotron motor also has the advantage of higher displacement. This is a 1.2. But at the same time, the Tiago is also a heavy car. Therefore, the Tiago has a lower power to weight ratio, and that shows. It is only a shade quicker than the Celerio in terms of outright and in-gear acceleration, but slower overall than the less powerful Santro. The The Santro managed a 0 to 100 km/h run in 16.3 seconds. But its eager powertrain does take a toll on the fuel economy, making it the least efficient car of this test, with the Celerio still ruling the fuel economy throne. If you were to choose one of these three cars as your first car, then in all likelihood, the drivability in the city or getting a judgment of all the four corners of the car would be of top priority to you. And from that standpoint, the Santro absolutely nails it. The glasshouse is large, so getting clear visibility from either of the corners of this glasshouse is very easy. And you also get a slightly higher seating, so you get a more commanding view of the road as compared to what you get in the Tiago or in the Celerio. That also makes it quite easy and more confident to drive in tight spaces. And speaking of tight spaces, this one also has a really tight turning radius, which again makes it quite easy to drive. So which is the better automated manual transmission to choose from? Well, in terms of pure shift quality, I think the Tiago just nails it. It has the best shift quality of the three AMTs that we are testing here. But in terms of sheer responsiveness, it has to be Hyundai's AMT. And for a first attempt, I think it's a commendable job. It responds really nicely to path throttle and full throttle inputs. It's ready to drop up to 3 gears. It's ready to also rev all the way to the red line. In comparison, the other two AMT boxes, the one in the Tata and the one in the Maruti Suzuki, they seem a little too eager to rush to higher gears to give you better fuel economy. This one does that too, but when you actually go pedal to the metal, which you won't often, but if you do, this is more responsive. The AMTs on both the Celerio and the Tiago feel sluggish in comparison. Around the twisties or on inclines though, all the three AMTs seem to lose their bearings, often fluctuating between second and third and not making much progress. You're better off using the manual mode in such scenarios. So which of the three has better handling? Again, it is the Tiago. Just the way it has an eager motor, it also has eager handling dynamics. Show it some bends and this car loves to have fun. The Santro on the other hand feels a little wallowy because of its tall boy design. The Celerio, the tires, or rather it feels under-tired, that's the word that I like to use for it. This one in comparison has a more balanced overall handling dynamics. It also feels more stable at speed, which means it's also a very good highway cruiser. The Celerio has better steering and brakes though, both progressive, intuitive and precise. Despite its skinny tires, it's quite fun to drive like a typical entry-spec Suzuki, and its humble power output never really overpowers you. From a safety standpoint, the three cars are quite closely matched, with at least a driver's side airbag and ABS being standard. While all the three cars claim structural safety to be compliant with front and side impact collision impact norms that are laid down by the Indian government, there's no available crash test data to quantify those claims. Let's now answer the most important question. Which one of these three is the cheaper to own? Well, cost of ownership has always been Maruti Suzuki's strong point, and that holds true for the Celerio as well. It is cheap to own, it's cheap to service, the spares are cheap as well. But it's astonishing how Tata has managed to undercut the Celerio on all these counts with the Tiago. Furthermore, it also has a longer service interval, 15,000 kilometers compared to the 10,000 kilometer service interval for the Celerio and the Santro. For Hyundai, cost of ownership, cost of spares, cost of service has always been slightly on the higher side compared to the other cars in the segment, and that doesn't change with the Santro either. Their comeback to it, however, is that they're offering better service packages, up to 2 years of free service. They're also offering a better warranty package. You can opt for up to 5 years compared to the 2 to 3 years for the Celerio or the Tiago, which I think in my books is a very strong point. But speaking of points, it's the final number of points that will decide a winner. So, time to sum it up. One glance at the points table will tell you that the Santro has had a clear advantage in coming late to the party. It has wisely benchmarked the other cars in the segment to supersede them on most counts. It suffers on the all-important kitna deti hai aspect, but more than makes up for it with a fat list of features and a very competitive price tag. In that, it sets a new benchmark that is going to be hard to beat.
Well, we've run out of time on this week's episode of Overdrive, but remember, you can stay in touch with the team through Facebook, through Twitter, and you can follow our latest videos on our YouTube channel. Also, you can keep track of the latest updates in the automotive world on our Instagram page as well. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye and many thanks for watching.